Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. My name is Mashir. I am the founder of the Power in You Unlimited, and I love talking about your purpose, surrender to purpose. Right now, today, I have the amazing, phenomenal, he is an extraordinary healer, and I'm so grateful for the opportunity to interview him and find out some things a little bit more personal about him because this man, the gift that he has and the journey that his life has went on is amazing, and I'm sure it's going to touch each and every one of you. I want to introduce some, you may know him, but he's a friend of mine, and I'm excited for today. Hello, Hillis Pugh. How are you?
Hello, Moshe. Thank you so much. I can't wait because you know, I feel this is going to be a reintroduction because people know me, and then there are people that don't know me that just know what I do. And so this
Right.
be a good opportunity for people to really get into the depths of who I am and how I started my journey. So I'm excited to share this information with others.
Yeah, when you and I we had a conversation, and some of the things that you've learned and that you've become a master in is just so profound. Um, it's going to be interesting to find out about the person and the man. So, quick question: when did you first realize that you were different?
That is a question I felt has been on cycle multiple places in my life. But the first time I felt that I was different is when I was maybe about 4 or 5 years old, is when I started to have visions. And I remember uh, one instance in particular, I would go to bed and then I would see like these geometric patterns on my closet door. And mind you, my closet door was painted like a dark blue. Funny, I'm still wearing blue to this day. Uh, and I remember the first time I ever told anybody was my stepfather. Oddly enough, I don't recall telling my mom or my aunt or grandma. Maybe I did, but I recall telling my stepdad that I saw like these geometric shapes on my door, and this was like over 40 years ago. I don't remember what his response was, but it was then. It's like, something unique was happening in that moment. Maybe I was still connected, had a strong connection to source energy, because as kids, we still
Yeah.
have those strong ties and those strong connections. So, but growing up in a religious household, there are certain things you could say and couldn't say. So.
Right. So yeah, that's what I mean. So you saw the geometric patterns on your door, and like as a kid that young, it did it register that like maybe everybody sees these things,
Yeah,
or how did
yeah.
you
I mean,
know?
honestly, that's what it felt like. Because as a kid, when you are, in the space of experiencing something or seeing something. In this instance, with the geometric shapes, especially when I would go to sleep, I thought everybody could see these things. And obviously not everyone could, especially the adults in life. They couldn't see these things. I'm like, oh, okay. So
So
yeah.
what age was it when you like were like, hold on, somebody's got to help me, or I got to tell somebody something, because one, this is scary, or like you're recognizing that you're different, you're recognizing that nobody else is experiencing this or sharing with you similar experiences.
It wasn't until maybe like late teens, early 20s is when I started to really have premonitions and
Mhm.
really began to experience strong deja vus. And the strongest premonition that I have to this day is the one about my grandmother's death. And, you know, this is just stuff that you can't talk about, growing up in a religious household, a black household, where you're like, oh, well, what am I
That's the
going to
devil.
say? Right, exactly, exactly. And so it, it it's just, when did I get help? It's funny because this is almost, it was a blessing in disguise, so to speak. It wasn't until late 20s until I started like having psychic readings and really getting, stepping into that path, like mid to late 20s. And when
So I
I,
guess my question is, I don't want to stop you here. So
yeah,
you were having deja vus, premonitions, different
yeah.
things, and you knew that this was something that other people weren't experiencing. What were some of your first, like, okay, I need to go get a reading, or I need to like seek out someone who may be an authority in this field? What was that experience like for you?
Well, I remember my mom, she had tarot cards, and my mom would always do readings on herself. And the thing is, she always told me, don't play or don't mess with tarot cards. And mind you, I was like a teenager, and I'm like, okay, not do that. But it wasn't until my grandmother started getting sick, and this is when I had the premonition about her. And then this is when, a few years later, after I had the premonition, a couple of years later, I told my aunt about it. And then that's when I started to really find someone in the spiritual space to really receive, guidance about this and what it is that I should do. Because at the time, I was just, a regular guy, corporate America, wanting to be a poet, wanting to be this author. So that was my thing. I wasn't focused on the spiritual path at all.
So well, you said something so interesting. So growing up in a religious household, but your mom had tarot cards.
Yeah.
So there's some spiritual DNA that you're not letting us know about. What's going on with
Well,
that?
Well, honestly, I don't know because my mom kept a lot of stuff to herself.
Okay.
It wasn't until she passed almost 9 years ago that I found out little other things about her. But my mom, what I loved about her was the fact that she never had me baptized. When I turned 20, actually, when I started going to a church that I chose and got baptized there, I think I was 18, 19. I was like, late, early 20s, around that time frame. And my mom told me, it's like, I didn't want to baptize you as a baby because I wanted you to choose. I wanted you to find your way through all of this. So my mom was very supportive in whatever it was that I wanted to do in that respect, especially when it came to my spiritual or religious beliefs. However, there were some things I didn't have a choice in, like, I had to go to a Catholic school. Went
Hmm.
to a Catholic school my whole entire life, from kindergarten all the way up to high school. And then, the most confusing thing was going to a Catholic school. And then one Sunday a month, especially in grammar school, I had to go to church because it was part of my grade. But
Yeah.
on other Sundays, I went to a Baptist church. And I'm like, okay, so you know how it is.
I
I
went to
mean,
Catholic school as well. I think that a lot of religious Baptist families, Black families, didn't have Christian schools that they could send their kids to, but wanted to make sure that there was some sort of, religious foundation. I went to Catholic school too, so I understand completely what you're talking about. What struck me then is the spiritual DNA, like the assignment, like the family that you were born into. So if your mom already knew about spiritual mystical things outside of the church, and maybe she tried to shield you from sharing that with you because of what she had to deal with, in family. But if it's in your spiritual DNA, it's in your spiritual DNA.
yeah, and one of the things that I found out about my mom after she passed was how much she was really getting into that. How she was like always looking for something, always like wanting to have hope and wanting to have that light in her life. But one of the things, conversations that I will hold dear to this very day is a few weeks before my mom's passing. We had an amazing conversation. My mom understood, and mind you, this has been maybe about more than 10 years of my mom me trying to explain to my mom what it is that I do, who I am. One year she bought me a thick book about New York City, and it was like, here, maybe this will help you with your gifts. I'm like, Mom, it doesn't work that way. It doesn't work. And so she didn't get it, but the time my mom finally understood is when she was going to come to do an ayahuasca ceremony with me. She understood all of that.
She
Got
did?
her. No, let's hear me out. I'm
Okay.
getting so she we I got her flight. Booked her Airbnb. All of that. It was a few weeks before her 60th birthday, and she never made it. She transitioned
Wow.
uh, due to some, I'm not going to get into the details of it,
Yeah.
but she transitioned, but she was still there with me at ceremony nonetheless, because,
Nonetheless.
it's just, she got me, she understood.
Wow. That is so, I'm grateful for you sharing because from my experience, spiritual DNA is a lot, because the families that we were born into help form us into who we are for the destiny and the assignment and the contract, it all works together.
Yeah.
So, as a teenager or maybe a young kid, were there, we all have issues and things that we have to get. Like, I'm super creative. So I was the weird creative girl. And it hurt a lot with my peers because my creativity and spirituality had me very different than my peers and my friends. And I went through a really hard time. And it's a part of my story of how I grew spiritually. Is some
Mhm.
of that resonate with you, like who you were, maybe as a preteen and a teen, and like dealing with the shifts and the changes of puberty, and how
Oh
did
my
you
God.
deal with, yeah, but yeah, that's like real. How did you deal with
You
the coming of
know,
age and the spirituality and the spiritual
it
DNA?
wasn't. There was no. The only thing that was spiritual in my life at the time was going to church.
Right,
Honestly, I mean, there wasn't. It wasn't so much in the house. It was so much. There was rules and things we had to abide by. My cousin and I, because being raised by my mom and my grandma. Just the three women, and they
mhm,
ran the house. I mean, what they said went, and that was
right,
that. You
right.
that was that. But as you say that, there are things that do stick out. I remember, there was, and this is one thing that I want psychiatrists, people in the field of therapy, and want people to understand is that when there are moments of transition in a child's life, it reflects in everything. It reflects everywhere. And there was the one of the times that I'm being guided to share right now is when I was maybe in fifth, sixth grade, and we just moved to a new neighborhood, new school, all this stuff. Private school. It was one teacher, and she taught kindergarten through sixth grade, and
Mhm.
she taught all of us. It was one teacher that taught all the kids,
Wow.
and it was maybe about 10 of us, 10 to 12 of us, and she taught all of us separately, like
For
the
your age and your group.
exactly. And one of the things that she said to me, and it pissed me off and hurt me at the same time, because I knew I wasn't dumb. I knew that I was very intelligent. But she said to me was that it's like, you cannot get by on your charm and good looks alone. That will never save you. And I'm like, where's that coming from? I mean, geez. I mean, that was like right here.
Like,
you know,
what a way to try to kill a kid's spark.
but the thing is, what I've learned about myself is that was, one of the times I was beginning to develop my creative outlet, you know, is one of the first things I did was to learn how to sew, and I made a pillow. And then I decided to say, well, that was not for me. So, I'm a simple guy. I like simple things. I like easy, And for me, writing came natural because, a great communicator, in the ways of poetry. And people always ask me, well, who's your favorite poet? I'm like, I don't have one because I choose not to uh read anyone else's work. I mean, there's oh geez, what is his name? Not James Baldwin, but there's another, um and I have his book too. It's on the tip of my tongue. His name is Bruce somebody, another gay black poet that was during the Renaissance period, along with James Baldwin, but he's lesser known. His stuff is amazing. I
Okay.
wish I could think of his name. But as I started to read, the common stuff, Langston Hughes and all those other people, common folk, I say, this is what I want to do, because there's the simplicity of the expression by saying so little,
Mm-hmm.
and the power and impact
Mm-hmm.
of that, it really struck me. And so from there forth, words have always been my thing, and how to express them in an artistic way.
Wow. Yeah, I love that answer. I do believe that creativity is one of the highest forms of spirituality because when you're tapped in, you're not thinking, you're
No.
just being. You're just being. And that's like a close connection to source. Um, so you mentioned something. You said another gay black writer.
Yeah.
I had no idea, so when I meet people and I see the experience of someone's gift that has the ability to bless me or is something that resonates with me and I tap in, sexuality is something that I never look at. So I would have never thought that of you, no judgment either way, but
Yeah.
that had to be impactful on your life and your self exploration and getting to know you with all these gifts, and you're recognizing
Mhm.
here's another layer of how I'm different than everybody in the world. What
Right.
did that look like?
Well, when you go to high school, when you're in junior high, seventh and eighth grade, you go through puberty. That was the worst time of my life. I mean, you talk about being embarrassed, ridiculed, shamed, everything from, how I looked with my freckles, everything, from my ears to body odor. I mean, come on, you're going through puberty. That's like the worst time your body is going through like
It is for everybody.
accelerated changes. I mean, and mind you, there was times I didn't want to go to school, especially during, seventh and eighth grade, because of me going through these chemical changes. And I'm like, what is this now? What's happening now? And so I didn't have, the bad skin, and it's funny because there's this young lady, her name was Brandy, and she found me on Facebook last year, and she reached out to me. It's gonna make me cry. She reached out to me, and mind you, she looks a little bit different than she did in junior high. And we started talking. We had a conversation. And she said to me, Hillis, you were always so kind to me. You was always so nice to me. Because she had really bad acne. All the kids were making fun of her. And I was like, yeah, I understood because, heck, my last name is Pugh. And just so happened I was going through very strong chemical change. My body odor was like, ugh. I didn't know you wanted to be near me. Nothing, no kind of deodorant. No baking soda, nothing. It was like, it wasn't strong enough for me. And I was like embarrassed. But it wasn't until I got to high school, that I really began to learn more about who I was as a person, going to an all black, all boy high school. Now that was life changing in the sense of, finding out who I am as a black boy, a black boy, then really understanding that. And then, maybe sophomore, junior year, learning about my sexuality. Yeah, I went out with dates on girls, even kissed a couple of them. But, it wasn't until, reading about, James Baldwin and Zora Neeston, uh, you know, all
Zora
the
Neale Hurston. Yeah.
yes, thank
Mhm.
you, Langston Hughes. But one of the things that and I didn't find this out till after I graduated high school is that about James Baldwin. James Baldwin was gay, and I'm like, no one told us that in high school. But mind
Right.
you, but mind you, I was at a all boy Catholic high school. They're not going to tell you James Baldwin is gay. I mean,
That's right.
there's these little things, and it wasn't until I saw this movie in the late 2000s called Brother to Brother with and oh geez, what's his name? The guy that played Antoine Fisher.
I
Oh
know who
my,
you're speaking of. I can't think of his name
yes,
either.
Anthony Mackie,
Yeah, Anthony Mackie. Yep.
and he played this young guy, and he was befriended this poet of the Harlem Renaissance, but he didn't know it. And his name was Bruce somebody. I see the image of the book in my head, and the book is in the box with all my other books, and I wish I could grab it and tell you his name. And I read his stuff. His stuff is freaking amazing, in my opinion. Better than James Baldwin, better than Langston Hughes. I mean, he tapped into a way of storytelling that just surpassed creating mental visuals. It was very emotive.
Mhm.
And as one who writes poetry, you have to allow yourself to express the emotions, because then that's the time when I started doing open mic nights in Chicago.
Okay.
Open mic, because I mean that was a thing. I mean, you going out on a Wednesday or Thursday night. That's how I met. My That's actually how I met one of my best friends. To this day, 20+ years later, we're still good friends because we were open mic and just sharing poetry and sharing this creative space.
So yeah, so no, 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 because it all makes sense. Creative people have an easier time, I think, than more analytical left brain people, because creatives um, have a confidence of going with the flow.
Yeah.
Like they have a courage and a confidence because whatever their creative ability is, they can pour into that without fear. It's a part of them just being. But I'm trying to connect the dots because, for instance, uh, I went through sexual abuse as a young girl.
Hmm.
And because I'm an extreme, and you might as well say I was birthed on a pew. I was in church every day of the week, literally from birth.
Yeah.
And I also went to Catholic school for a few years. And then my mother sat on a lawn to make sure I got into a bilingual program school. Um,
Mm.
but because of the sexual abuse that I had as a child, and I watched my mother be a part of domestic violence. It wasn't so much physical, but it was a lot of mental and emotional abuse I watched her go through. And
Mm.
I watched my grandmother, who had two children by two different men, who was lovelorn. Like she longed to have the relationship that she wasn't able to have both times in her life. So the way that she loved and deposited into her children was different because of that. It was
Yeah.
almost like an abandonment issue. Like, I'm going to love you so much because I don't want you to ever leave me. So it's almost like she clipped their wings without her
Mm.
knowing it.
Yeah.
But that was my mother's story. So, me being a child into a marriage or a relationship where she was emotionally abused, didn't have the courage to leave because her mother's story anchored her
Yeah.
into a relationship. And I was the little girl who was sexually abused by that man she married.
Mm.
And
Mm.
so all of those things, as I'm in puberty, I'm 12, 13, I'm uber creative, but I'm the weirdo. But I'm spiritually tapped in, and I don't even know what spiritually tapped in means,
Yeah, you
because
just know. You just
I experienced it with my creativity, because inside my creativity, I'm really not me. Like, I get channeled, but I had no
yeah.
idea what any of that meant. So that's what I'm saying. Like, I learned through my healing how to connect the dots with the spiritual DNA, the physical 3D DNA, and what that journey looked like for me, because
Mm.
my healing, my self awareness, My sexuality, because of what I went through, I was hypersexual. I was hypersexual. And from the abortions, from the boyfriends, from the different things that happened to me, I think how I navigated those things brought me to this higher spirituality, because
Yeah.
I had the assignment in me always pulled me up out of it into another place.
Mm,
Even when I didn't see how I got pulled up into another place. And now when I'm in this other place, it's like, whew. But okay, so now I'm fighting another war in that other place because I'm just happy I got there.
yeah.
In what you've shared so far of your story, I can see the different bullets, but I'm trying to get a view of how
That's
they all
how it
come in
all comes.
alignment together.
That's one thing. There's really, from my experience, there really hasn't been that one trigger or that one thing. I feel it's always been a combination of everything. But what comes to my mind is what I'm being guided to share yet again. It's two things. I remember, I think I was 6, 7 years old, maybe 7, I don't know. Um, Actually, that was kind of a tough time because that's when my family, there was a lot of fighting, a lot of infighting with my family. My family, my grandmother and my aunt want me to stay with them and live with them. My mom wants me to come live and stay with her. And mind you, my mom was a cab driver, so she wasn't home a lot.
Mhm.
And so, and at the time, the person who I thought was my father, who's actually my stepfather, was in jail. So every month we would go off to Joliet and go see my dad, who thought I was my dad, but now my stepfather. And just in that, conundrum of relationship, my and I think I experienced my first loss when the family dog died, at that time. Family dog died, didn't know what to do. I was like emotional, but not emotional. I'm like, what just happened? And I remember my god uncle coming over and taking care of the dog and putting the dog in the trash, in the big garbage bin outside. And I'm like, oh, okay, this is normal, I guess. And so there was like this real of traumatic stuff that happened. And then sometime in that space, my aunt told me, well, my aunt didn't tell me. I think my mom told me, or somehow kind of figured it out, that my aunt was raped. That she was on one of her diets and she lost all this weight, and so she ended up being sexually abused. I'm like, oh, okay, what's happening? There's like all this stuff that's happening. And then, fast forward to, my teen years, my mom has been in and out of a verbally abusive relationship with this one guy. Meanwhile, the person who I thought was my father, my stepdad, he's still in jail. So it's like, okay, all the stuff that's happening. And felt abandoned by that man because in 1990, my mom said if we get, when she gets a particular package, that means he's out and he's coming to see me. And we're going to be together. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, fine, whatever. But it wasn't until my mom was started to be successful on doing stuff with her own, which helped me to see that I could do it too. At
Mhm.
the same time, she was in a verbally abusive relationship because my mom was a blues manager. She had, several blues acts that she managed around Chicago. She would do the circuit every summer. And so, one, and I had to get into a story about one of my summers when my mom was gone. That's an interesting summer. But I realized that my mom was doing drugs, and my mom was smoking weed, and my mom did cocaine. My mom was an alcoholic. My grandmother was an alcoholic. My aunt was addicted to food. So there was all these things, all this trauma that was in and around me, but it never took to me or to a high level. I was sensitive of it. I was aware of it. There was even one point where, am I addicted to food? Am I addicted to sex? Am I addicted? So it's like all these things that were coming to my awareness, and my family pretty much showed me, gave me examples of what not to do.
Right. Right.
So I am honored and appreciative of them going through what they went through. So
Hmm.
I didn't have to be,
Go through it.
no, well, not go through it, but for them to be the example for me to be aware of it, to see it in a different way, and to know the signs when it occurs. So
Hmm. Hmm.
it's really in that space.
Yeah, you know what? I'm so grateful, and I thank you so much. For me, I share openly a lot, and I feel like the transparency helps me connect and resonate with other people. But I truly appreciate you sharing so much personal information with me, because I feel like, surrender to purpose is the mission that I want to try to get across for folks, and have high level people like you who have gone on these phenomenal life experiences, received so much so that you could give and enlighten others. This was a good opportunity for us to sort of tap in to get to know what has fueled your journey, and what has, kept you pushing through, even though you may have had these life obstacles that were huge. Your assignment, the contract that you signed, you kept the assignment because you kept the ball rolling regardless of what you came up against. And yeah, I'm so grateful that you were able to share. Thank you so much, Hillis. I'm excited about more of the world getting to know you, who you are, and not just what you do, because everybody's storming you right now for what you do. Like, they all want to come in and get a piece of what you do, because the Lemurian light language and the healing and the ways that you can help people understand the energy that goes on behind the scene is bar none in the world. And I'm not just saying that, like, literally. So I appreciate getting to know you personally. It's been a wonderful time here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure, and I can't wait to continue this conversation.
Yes. I feel like there's so much more. I feel like we're just at the surface, like
Yeah,
unpacking.
yeah, exactly, exactly. So, thank you so much, Mashir.
Yeah. It's listen, if I could say one piece and tidbit, information is flooded. It's all out here. There's so much information. But when you actually can see the person, and you can resonate with some of the parallel things that happen in the density of where we live and how we live, and that person
Mm,
was so tapped into their destiny and to their life and their assignment, they were able to get to a space to not have any of that touch them, and share from a pure place. And so, yeah, that's what surrender to purpose
mm.
is. I'm so grateful to know you, and for more people to get to know you. Although the information in what you do is great, it's the part of getting to know you which really helps people tap in, and
Yeah.
it's what resonates.
Mm. Thank you. Thank
You're
you so
welcome.
much.
Thank you. Yes,